KeyCare is the only virtual care company that has our own instance of Epic, but that means that we're able to share data more easily with all the other Epic sites. So there's really profound data interoperability. And then Epic's also created what I call workflow interoperability.
Dr. Lyle, thank you so much for hopping on today's podcast. For the audience listening, we have Dr. Lyle Berkowitz, CEO of KeyCare, joining us today. Thanks so much for making some time, Dr. Lyle.
Yeah, great to be here, Bert.
So first, Dr. Lyle, I want to jump right in. You've built and led innovation efforts across major health systems. You've launched startups from the ground up, including KeyCare. What led you to found KeyCare, and what problem were you trying to solve?
So, I look back at my career, and I'd say the biggest theme, has been around access and using technology. I call it my SAD philosophy. How do we simplify, automate, and delegate routine workflow? I'm an engineer by background, and we often talk about the problem being we have a shortage of physicians. Mm-hmm. And I actually turned that around a little and said, we don't have a shortage of physicians. We have a shortage of using them efficiently. Every other industry has figured out how to use technology and delegation of some sort to appropriately expand capacity for individuals. You think about lawyers and consultants, et cetera, and they have a big triangle, et cetera. And even in the medical community, a surgeon has a big team, a dermatologist often has a big team. I'm a primary care doc, and we rarely have the type of teams that would allow us to expand capacity. And part of that is, how do you pay for the staffing? Part of it is where do you put them? And so my solution to that, being like I said, a sort of computer guy, engineer in the initial parts of my life, are to how to use technology, to automate and simplify and expand capacity by, when appropriate, delegating certain activities. And so KeyCare was just the latest generation of that by building up virtual care teams that can work with current doctors in the office by giving them a virtual care team that can help with efficiency, and by even directly working with patients and giving our doctors at KeyCare, our virtualist, as much technology as possible to ensure that over time they'll be as efficient as possible, and therefore start improving access for the whole of the United States.
Yeah, it's well said. And is there anything from your own career journey that prompted specifically focusing on virtual care?
It was I think a combination of just my own interest in it to being in a city in Chicago where it's a tech forward type of city. So a lot of my patients, starting in the 1990s, right, wanted to email and do things online as much as possible. So I've been doing virtual care as part of my practice, since the mid 90s when I started. And what was strange to me was that people would write about it, and people would talk about it like it was something so, unbelievable new, but it always made sense. I came up in that age, and so it just always made sense. And what happened is I had a variety of telehealth projects when I was at Northwestern in Chicago. But then when I left Northwestern and joined a big telehealth company, it was even more obvious to me how this could scale. And again, with KeyCare, I'd say the two intersections were improving access, but also doing it in a coordinated way, which is why we base our technology on Epic, because that is so highly utilized in the healthcare industry that it means that when we see patients, we're not only giving really good access, but we're doing it in a way where we can see all their data because all the Epic sites are connected. And whatever we do is then available to the primary care doctors of the patients we see, assuming they have Epic, or even if they don't have Epic, we're part of a variety of interoperability networks that allow for sharing of data as well.
Yeah, right. And I think it's something like 40-50% of the major health systems in the country are on Epic, and that number may be growing with Oracle's latest announcement, so I think there's more.
They're different numbers, and you could say it's 40-50% of the hospitals, but it's often the bigger hospitals. So I think
Right,
the
right.
numbers closer to 70% of healthcare, sort of done on Epic. 75% of patients in the U.S. have at least some records on Epic,
I think that's
and
the
so
better
it's getting more and more ubiquitous.
Right. And I want to talk a little bit about the scaling piece, which you started to bring on, because virtual care, like you said, like these technologies have been around for a while. They're no longer like your add-on technologies, right? It's sort of like become like core infrastructure or technology for a lot of health systems and hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
What are they still getting wrong though about how to build or scale virtual care? Because
Yeah.
and then how are you guys like approaching it differently at KeyCare, especially with like AI and automation?
Yeah. So, when you think about any project, any industry, and particularly healthcare, it's always the people, process, technology, and I'll add business model as well.
Hmm.
So first, the people. Who are these doctors, right? I worry that a lot of health systems, do look at doctors as a commodity. Sometimes that happens, particularly in the primary care space, and particularly if they're looking at virtualist. And we're really embracing this concept of virtualist as a unique subspecialty, so to speak, similar to the hospitalist movement of the 90s. In the 1990s, there were no hospitalists. We sort of created that concept of doctors who would go in and just focus on the hospital all day. Before that, primary care doctors had to get up at 5 in the morning and go to the hospital for an hour or two before they started their office day. It was pretty brutal. So one is making sure we understand and appreciate and support the virtualist as a unique type of doctor
Mm.
who are seeing things, and the type of care that they deliver and the volume of care they deliver is different than the office. Virtualists in general are going to see a lighter weight type of patient, but would do it with more efficiency. Whereas I look at office-based care as something that should be reserved for higher complexity care in many cases. And maybe they should start seeing a smaller number of highly complex patients, where virtualists will see a larger number of less complex patients. So people, process, technology, the process, etc. And maybe we'll roll in some of the business model there. We've got to figure out who's paying for what. Now, the good thing is, because of COVID, insurance is now paying for virtual care.
Mm.
And that's made a huge difference. Before that time, the only virtual care that was done in many cases either had to be self-paid by patients, or certainly in a health system like a Kaiser that was capitated, they would include it for free
Mm.
because that would be less expensive. And then there were there are a variety of telehealth companies who struck individual deals with payers, but it was fragmented. And so that process is going to be important. And part of that process also rolls into technologies. What's the experience for a patient? And the good news is that because everything is online, because the type of things that we're seeing are often lower complexity, it really opens up the opportunity for automation and AI in ways that an office-based setting might not be able to do. So we have built a variety of tech and tools, as well as partnered with others around Epic itself is rolling out a variety of AI tools. We're using partners to help with ambient AI. We've
Mm.
built a variety of automation tools to help with the process of a patient requesting an immediate visit, connecting them to the right doctor. Epic has some of that built in. We've added additional things to make that easier. And we're looking forward to a world where we're really going to be embracing AI, automation, tech, etc., to make that process as efficient as possible so that we can expand access, make the experience as easy as possible, improve quality in a variety of ways as well.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, and I love what you said on embracing virtualists as a unique like type of specialist, And before we get to Epic, I want to ask you a question. You are a primary care doctor by background. In this model, are these this virtualist workforce, do they act almost as your primary care physician, but it's virtual? Like, are they the entry point? Because there's something like, I think it's like 30% of Americans don't have a designated primary doctor or go to one regularly. Like, so it's when you talk about
The
access,
numbers
but yeah,
probably closer to 30 to 50%,
yeah, yeah,
right? Who either don't have a PCP, or even if they do, they don't go in regularly.
right.
It's a big issue, right? Because they're not getting preventive care or chronic care. So we often partner with health systems, and I talk to them about the 3 C's of what we can help with. And that is cover, co-manage, and complete care. So what that means is the first C is cover. We're providing coverage. This is overflow for sort of on-demand urgent care. This is the day-to-day patients trying to get in. They have a new issue. They want to talk to someone immediately. We can provide a team that helps with that in an efficient manner, in a 24/7, often 50-state arrangement that solves some of the leakage issues or solves this issue of patients having to go to the ER because they have no other option. That's number one. Number two is what we call co-management. This is where a patient does have a primary care doctor, is seeing someone. However, it's not very efficient for them to go in 3-4 times a year for follow-up or for little things. And so we provide a team that coordinates with the primary care doctor and is able to help take care of small, minor, routine stuff or stable patients who need monitoring and management through the year. So instead of coming into the office every 3-4 months, maybe they can see a virtual care team, do what is needed based on what the primary care doctor has determined. This patient's stable. They just need these questions, these labs every 3-4 months, only escalate if there's a problem. So all of a sudden we've started load balancing appropriately, and allow the doctor in the office, the officeologist, to see more patients that have high complexity, less patients that have low complexity, and balance that correctly. And then the third offering is what we call complete care, and that is when we're the virtual first primary care team for a doctor. There are a lot of patients who can't get in, or quite honestly don't want to come in, and they want to have an all virtual primary care experience as much as possible, where we can do the basic preventive care and other routine management. And then if we find something, we escalate in to the health system. By doing all of this, we've in a variety of ways helped the health system transform how they manage a population by particularly taking some of the lower complexity patients and load balancing them to a virtual team that's really optimized for highly efficient care of that group.
Interesting. So it's almost like this 3C's model flexes based on not just the acuity of the patient, but how virtual first is primary care. You can either go the complete care route, and we can do some coverage, to really, like you said, the huge problem is patients just go to the ER, because that's an easy entry point, so provide coverage, or you can co-manage it. So it's a little bit of a blended approach, and load balance, like you call it. Load balancing is a big part of it, Now I want to speak to you knowing the 3C's model, going back to Epic for a second. So your virtualist workforce and this model really runs on its own Epic instance, from what I understand, right? It's really integrated with how your partner health systems use Epic, right?
So, remember the way Epic works is, sort of like Microsoft Office or some other software, right? Every Epic client has their own instance of Epic. And so Northwestern, Stanford, Johns Hopkins, and others all have their own instance of Epic, and they're able to customize certain workflows and technology parts of that. But the database is stable, so it allows for data to flow between two Epic instances. So KeyCare is the only virtual care company that has our own instance of Epic, but that means that we're able to share data more easily with all the other Epic sites. So there's really profound data interoperability. And then Epic's also created what I call workflow interoperability. There's ways to schedule across instances. There's ways to message and order across instances. So it allows us to really be a partner to other Epic-based health systems in ways that, quite honestly, the other EMRs really aren't even able to do.
Right.
And of course, because so many people use Epic, it gives us a big base upon which to work.
100%. Yeah, I'm sure that gives you a big leg up in terms, having your own instance of Epic in terms of being able to share data with another partner health system that comes in that's also on Epic. It gives you
right. I'd say the telehealth 1.0 companies, right, we're sort of working in a vacuum. So health systems, payers, et cetera, could work with these companies, but they were sending patients to a completely distinct technology that wasn't really integrated with the rest of the fabric of healthcare. So now, we've come in and said, hey, we're part of the system. We're going to do all the telehealth stuff, but we're going to do it on a technology that allows for easy interoperability. And on top of that, I mean, Epic is spending billions a year on improving their tech, adding on AI, et cetera. So we benefit from having a really good tech partner versus trying to build it all ourselves, which would be an extremely expensive, immense production, and we'd never keep up with a company like Epic in terms of how deep their technology can go.
Right. And how is that like? Are there any stories that come to mind in terms of how that's enabled like deeper integration collaboration across these Epic health systems using Epic? Like I know you talked about interoperability, we talked about AI. Are there any like success stories that come to mind around how it's enabled that?
So every month, we have a company meeting and we share stories, that our doctors have given us, right, about this. So I'll give you a couple examples. In one story, a patient, called up and, you think about, urgent care as, oh, they've got a sinus infection, UTI, a rash, and we take care of plenty of those. Mm-hmm. But they also sometimes call up and say, listen, I have some abdominal pain. I was in the ER last week. They did a CAT scan. I never really found out what happened. No one's contacted me. I don't know what to do. And our doctors are able to go in, look at the ER visit, look at the CAT scan, and talk to the patient about how they're feeling now and make a determination. Sometimes what we do is triage to the right place. In that case, the CAT scan just showed some cysts or something that were not particularly dangerous, and the plan was to follow up with the OB-GYN, and the patient was educated, instructed, and assured what to do, and it prevented an additional ER visit, which is what they were going to do otherwise. And so having that past information was really important to avoid extra care. On the other hand, give you the other side of the story, a patient called up and said, hey, I'm about to go on a trip to Hawaii. I'm going to fly. Can you give me that medicine they gave me last time I had some leg pain? And the doctor's like, well, I need, what do you mean? He's like, can you just go look? Now, a typical telehealth company would have no access to that. We had full access. And the doctor is able to find out, a year before, the patient had developed a blood clot in their leg while traveling and got a blood thinner to treat it. The patient now is having similar pain and is asking for the blood thinner before they get on a plane. That is not what's going to happen. Instead, the patient was instructed to go to the ER, assess, and find out if they had a blood clot so they could start blood thinners immediately. Right. Both of those stories depended on having access to some past recent information. One resulted in avoiding an ER visit. The other was appropriately sending someone to the ER so they didn't develop a blood clot and possibly a pulmonary embolism, a plane ride to Hawaii.
Right. Yeah. No, those are both very powerful stories. I mean, it goes both ways, right? With access to care, it's either like preventing the ER visit in your first story. In the second case, it's like this patient may have signs of a more complex, or a recurring blood clot, get them to the ER, so it goes both ways, right? In terms of...
Yeah, I sometimes think about what we do as concierge for the masses, right? People have concierge doctors so they can call up and talk to someone when they need. And that's part of what we do to help. And to me, that's really important. I'm really worried about primary care. We're seeing so many, doctors go to concierge, and that means they see less and less patients. And so there's less and less primary care doctors available. We have to figure out how to expand that capacity of the doctors that we have. And a lot of times patients, they don't need super complex care, but they do need to talk to someone just for a few minutes, in a way that a doctor, sometimes part of our job is just instructing a patient, you have to go to the ER. Some of the most important things that we do are not necessarily diagnosing and treating something, it's triaging something and helping the patient understand. Because a lot of people, I don't want to go to the ER if I don't have to. And to hear a doctor say, yes, you have to go, it's really important, right? Because this is what might be happening. I've done this my whole career, where we've had to talk someone into going, and we actually had one of our health systems review of the patients that we sent to the ER, what happened, and it turned out And over half the cases we sent, those patients got admitted. All the cases were appropriate to go to the ER, and some were really quite severe. But these patients, they didn't want to go. They needed to talk to someone to convince them to go, and that's part of our job as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's well said. And you would think we coming out of COVID figured out this virtual care model, and it's almost like we reached this point of like more mass adoption coming out of COVID, but now it comes down to really the workflow elements of it, right? Like how can you as an organization really dial in your virtual care workflow so that it meets the needs of these different types of patient populations, whether it's ones that need to just get that primary care consultation or speak to a doctor, whether it's the ones that actually need to go to the ER, like you're saying, right? Like that's probably where the sweet spot is in terms of dialing in those workflows. And with this Epic instance, I'm sure that gives you and the KeyCare team like a leg up in terms of helping these health systems establish those different workflows, right?
Yeah, and we're trying to say, look, one, you don't have to build up your own workforce. Most people go to health systems, right, because they can take care of the most complex stuff. They
Right.
don't, no health system differentiates how well they treat a sinus infection or cold, right? But there is the ability to have more access. And the question is, some health systems are willing to have a partner do it. Others want to do it all themselves, or honestly, just don't even do it. And the result is a lot of access issues. You asked about how health systems make mistakes. I'd say the biggest two mistakes they make are one, are thinking that patients don't want to do virtual care anymore. They'll say, oh, we've seen telehealth go down. Like every study that's been done on patients shows that the interest and demand for virtual care is very high. In fact, most studies consistently show about a third of patients would prefer virtual care for a majority of their health. A third would be perfectly happy and satisfied and will do whatever's most convenient, office or telehealth, which is usually the latter. And a third really want to come into the office, which is great. That's fine. And yet health systems often will say, oh, patients want to come back in the office. And go, that's not true. The problem is you're not offering telehealth. And so the second mistake they make is that they assume their doctors can and will do some assortment of office and telehealth and go back and forth. And I'd argue, it's a cognitive dissonance for a doctor to do an office visit and then a virtual visit and go back and forth.
Right,
it's not particularly efficient. And so this is all mostly under the people mantra. And so I'd say health systems, one, recognize you have a lot of patients who would really like to do telehealth, but you have to offer them the supply. And if your doctors aren't doing it because it's out of their typical workflow, and by the way, you probably don't pay them well for it, then there's not going to be a supply, and therefore demand will go unmet. And if you can provide a supply, you'll find that the demand is there, but you also have to work that into your processes. So when someone calls the call center, goes to your website, leaves a message for your doctor, that there is a easy connection into a virtual care option.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. It's almost like it can't be retroactive because of this cognitive dissonance, this point you made, right? If like a patient goes and sees their doctor regularly in the office, yes, introducing telehealth may want that patient not to prefer that over their existing in-person like office visit option. But if it's embedded into the workflow from the beginning, you will be able to serve your populations a lot more effectively.
Mm-hmm.
With that in mind, we spoke about your 3Cs model, how you guys run on your own Epic instance, the very powerful stories you shared. What is still like the biggest barrier to adoption for these health systems when it comes to a virtualist workforce? And how are you guys like helping them overcome that?
So probably the biggest barrier, is making sure the right people are aligned and making sure the incentives are aligned. So one of the other 3Cs I talk about, are to get adoption to the health system, and particularly from the providers at the front lines, is we need to make sure that any virtual care partner, is providing connected care. We're thinking about comp redesign for the doctors in the trenches and other cultural changes. Let me explain. So first of all, if you're going to come in as a partner, you better do it in a very coordinated, connected way. Doctors in the trenches aren't going to easily tell their patients to go work with a partner if they don't feel it's coordinated. We solve that problem. And so that's the easier one for us. The second C, we don't have as much control over, and that is comp redesign. And you look surprised when I said that, and yet that may be the most important issue that we have. If we work with a health system who pays their doctors based on the doctor's RVU based volume care, and we come in and say, hey, good news, we've got this virtual care team that can offload and load balance and take some of your patients, we're not going to get much interest from the doctors in the trenches. But if we come in and say, hey, you're getting paid based on your panel size, not your individual volume, and how many patients you can manage with a team, all of a sudden the primary care docs are going to say, hey, this is great. Yeah, I'll expand my panel size using a KeyCare virtual team, and all of a sudden I'll get paid more. I'll need to see less patients in the office, and my patients will get more consistent care and better access overall. So we can flip that really based on how we pay the doctor. I didn't get an MBA, Bert, but I learned an important thing is in the business side is that incentives matter, whether you think they do or not. And how we pay our doctors is going to have a downstream impact on the adoption, because they're the ones who are going to tell the patients, hey, you should see my virtual care team versus don't see anyone else, come see me. And a lot of that's going to be based on how they get paid, understandably. The last C I said was cultural changes. That is education and leadership around the fact that virtual care, is good care, and is team-based care is good care, and that patients need to understand that that's the appropriate balance. We have to train our doctors, our staff, our patients, all educate them all about the fact that this is part of the future, and using tech and AI will be part of that as well.
Right.
So all these things come together, but I guarantee you at places, again, you look at a Kaiser where things are much more aligned, capitated type care, you're going to have a much better ability to do a lot of care virtually without them having to come in. And when we talk to health systems, and we realize we have to talk to not just the primary care folks, but the population health, ACO, health plan folks, etc. It is a multi-layered world, and the more you can get the incentives aligned, the easier you can get the adoption to expand.
Yeah, it's just almost like double paradox in healthcare, where the incentives are oftentimes volume based for individual physicians, but a lot of the work is done at a team level, right? It's like any sort of adoption for any technology or new workflow needs to be endorsed by the team, but ultimately the incentives are around the individual, so it's kind of like addressing both, but it's clear that you guys have found this area of, hey, it's not volume, it's actually your panel size, and that's what gets the team bought in, because then that's like, okay, me as the primary care doctor, it's not that I have to sit on every virtual consultation, but now I can have a team that helps supports me with that and oversees my entire panel of patients. I'm sure that speaks volumes to them.
Yeah, and it's not for every doctor all the time, but certainly when I talk to health systems, I say, look at your most experienced, busiest, popular doctors first. They're the ones who are the rainmakers. And what you've done is told them, hey, close to new patients. No other industry would do that. Every other industry knows you surround them. You don't tell your cardiologist, hey, your cardiac surgeon, hey, stop. You can only do, we're going to give you a small team and you can only do 2 surgeries a day. You're going to surround them with a team and allow them to be the rainmaker and to figure out how to expand their capacity. And we just haven't done that nearly as well in primary care. So part of what we're doing is much more than just virtual care. It is really team-based care approach, and in ways that can use, again, people, process, technology to make it efficient.
Yeah, and I want, earlier you had mentioned they don't have to develop their own virtualist workforce, right? They can.
It is. It's an expensive, time-consuming, and distracting. A health system has only so many bets they can make, and I'd rather have a health system focus on treating really complex diseases and only things that they can do in their office. For something like this, that's what I call the bottom of the pyramid, lower complexity, lower value, so to speak, for the health system, use a partner. Use a partner who's really expertly fine-tuned around that, who knows how to, be profitable around that, and use a partner that's coordinated with you. And all of a sudden,
Hmm.
you get the best of all worlds.
Yep, right. And on that point on using a partner, what's next for you guys at KeyCare? And how can health systems and other potential partners who are listening to this explore working with your team and connect with you online?
Yeah. So, we are continuing to expand, the type of things we can provide, both the primary care docs as well as to outpatient specialty care. We are adding on new technology to make our doctors and staff as efficient as possible. And we're expanding to who we can work with. We work with health systems right now. We're talking to a variety of other players in the healthcare ecosystem as well. Really, anyone who needs a national medical group, because we're virtual, we can literally work in any state and do a lot of additional things. People come to us through our website, keycare.org. They come to us through our LinkedIn or my LinkedIn, and many who are already in the Epic community come to us through a variety of ways, through talking to, we're on the Epic Showcase, and a lot of, we've done a variety of seminars and webinars for other Epic users. We're at the Epic user group meeting, etc. So lots of ways to find us from that perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I know you said you work with physicians that are in the trenches, but you guys are in the trenches with Epic as well, which I'm sure is very valuable for a lot of these health systems using Epic. And a lot of the market, like you said, 75% of the patients in the US use Epic, which in other words means and oftentimes my chart, right? Like I think we're all
Exactly. Yeah. And we're very integrated into my chart. There's a button in my chart that every health system has. It can be called Talk to a Doctor Now, get virtual urgent care. But when you press that button, if we're connected to a health system, we appear there as an option. And our goal is to to work with as many health systems as possible to be part of their workflow.
Right, right. And a parting question here, because I know you probably get this one all the time on meetings with health systems, like AI, like how do we immerse AI into those buttons or like just generally the workflow, right? If you had to say any parting words on the direction of KeyCare with AI, what would you say on that?
Yeah, well, first of all, when we think about the workflow, there's pre-visit, visit, post-visit, and each of those have an opportunity to have AI. I think we've already seen on the pre-visit side where we're seeing a lot of data capture before the visit, so that it's going to be a more efficient visit with the doctor. And some of the cool things I've seen, of course, are being able to talk to the patient, capture data. There are companies that use AI to capture vital signs, which I think, is going to be amazing for virtual care to have more of that. They capture, blood pressure, pulse. Some of them even capture glucose and other lab values. It's amazing what's able to get. They're still working on FDA approval. During the visit, we already use an ambient AI vendor, like I said, and after and there's other things that Epic's rolling out. So we're in close talks with Epic about being sort of early adopters about their AI tech. They're going to have agentic agents. They're going to have summaries. They're going to have things for quality, etc. And post visit, being able to have an AI bot follow up with the patient, etc. There's going to be lots of opportunity, not just to improve efficiency, but also to improve quality.
Yeah, yeah, well said. Well, I'm really excited, like you are, to see how AI gets immersed into the workflow pre-visit, during the visit, and post-visit as technologies, not just your guys's, continue to expand and really diagnostic tools get in the hands of patients more, because now they're going to be able to like do a lot of this vital sign capture, like you're talking about, in the home, like even outside of their visit, right? So, and then within the visit, of course, the technology is getting better there with ambient listening and physicians beginning to adopt in their teams AI. But I'm really excited to see, like you are, where this heads. And it's been a pleasure speaking to you today, Dr. Lyle, and excited to keep tabs on your guys' journey at KeyCare. And thanks for the great conversation today.
Okay, well, good. Thanks for doing what you're doing. We appreciate getting the word out.
Yes, 100%. And we'll keep doing that.